So I am ready now. I'm going to start off by stitching this right here. It's just decorative. As I said before, since it's not going to really stitch to anything else, I'm not going to worry about it. And I normally do about 3 times the length of something. 3 or 4 times the length. And that's usually about how much thread you're going to need. Because you have to have the thread for the needle and what have you. Now, threading a needle. This is the one thing it's absolutely crucial to learn how to do. If you don't thread a needle right, it's going to suck when you try to stitch, because it'll come undone. It doesn't matter what knot I've tried them all. Square knot, you name it, they all just keep coming undone over and over and over again. So here you go. I'm going to smooth out this by just pushing on it with my finger. Slide it in through, like so. I'm going to pull it out about almost 1 length of the needle and a half. Okay? About 1.5 the length of the needle. Then I'm going to hold on to this right here. I'm going to put this up against my finger, like so. And I'm literally going to take the needle and I'm going to push it in through the thread. Like, come on. You're going to push it literally into the thread. It's easier if I do this, and I'm not trying to show it in a tutorial, but poke right through the thread. It's not working very well. See that? I have literally split the thread with the needle. Okay? Then I'm going to do it again, a little bit further down. I'm going to literally push it right up through the thread again, and then one more time for good measure. Push it right up through the thread. See that? So now you have the needle is actually passing through the thread 1, 2, 3 places. Now, you're going to take the thread and you're going to slowly move it down. Okay? Slowly move it down the needle. This is crucial to learn how to do this, because this is the one thing you need to know how to do if you want to get your threading to hold in place. You're going to literally pull this over the thread. See if I can do it without interfering it. See that? You're going to pull this onto the actual thread. Do the same thing here. Push that on. Push that on. Slowly you're going to pull out this thread all the way out. Like that. So now this needle has been threaded through the actual thread in 3 places. Then I normally just take the needle and I just pull it in like this. So now your needle has been, your thread has actually been threaded through the end of the thread in 3 places. That is how you get your thread to hold in place when you're stitching. The only way I've seen that actually works. Thank you so much to the expert that showed this, and he did a very good job showing it, because I kept having my thread pop off and it was so annoying. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You put 1 needle on each side. Again, just flatten it, push it in through the needle, like so, about 1.5 needles of length. A needle and a half. Push in through the thread. 1, 2, 3. Pull it on through, just like so. Okay, and there you have it. Now you have your thread, 2 needles on each side, and your thread. Okay. When I start stitching, let me get it zoomed in a little bit here. I like to start back 1 spot. And I'll stitch through, take both needles in both hands, pull it through until I'm exactly in the middle. Okay? Now I will take my needle and I'll poke it through the outer edge right here, pull it through, take the other one and I'll poke it through the back like so. And once you get the loop on both sides, I'm going to pull tight. And then I'm going to go back through the hole that I was just in, pull it all the way through, pull it all the way through. Try not to split through the thread when you come back in. And that creates a double loop on the end, nice and tight. Okay? So now I can go and just start looping through and doing the staddle stitching, like so. Now some of these guys, they have stitching stations, they have all kinds of cool stuff that they use. I do have a stitching station, but for smaller stuff it's not necessary, I find. It's not like I'm stitching, a car seat or something. I do one at a time, because it's really hard to do it if you're not using a stitching station. You can see the threading's coming through, like so. Really hard to stitch black with black thread. In case you're wondering why I'm not using black thread, I almost always prefer to stitch with a different color than the leather, because it makes it a lot easier to see the thread against the leather. And black is kind of a pain to do if you're trying to use black thread. I mean, it looks nice when you want it to look more seamless, but man, it can be real challenging at times seeing the holes you have to go into. That's what it's looking like now. Again, the advantage of doing a round button needle, you can poke through the hole and you're not going to poke the crap out of your fingers. Okay? Now I'm going to show what happens when you make a mistake. I think it's necessary to do this. Let's say I'm not paying attention and I skip a hole, like there. I'm just fiddling around. Oh, I've skipped a hole. Now sometimes you can just push right back through the hole and pull it right out again. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've made the mistake and before you realize it, if you split the other thread, we go into the thread, I'll show you what I mean by that right here, because I'm going to actually split the thread on purpose to show you what happens when you split the thread and you go into the wrong hole. See, here's me splitting the thread. Okay? Let's say I'd gone into the wrong hole and I had just split the thread like that. Okay? It looks fine here, but if you try to go back out again to correct your mistake, this is what happens. See that? You end up in the thread still. You do not want to split your thread. So there's only one real good way that I know of to pull the thread out of there and correct your mistake. The only one way that I know of. That's just to take your thread. Now if you're lucky enough that the threading, that you can try to poke it through there, then great. If you got that kind of eyesight, maybe you'll luck out and you can actually get it through there and do that. But if you try it and then you end up just making it worse, like I just did, see that? Now it's even worse. So what do? I basically just made a knot, right? Okay. You have no choice. You have to cut your thread, okay, and then pull it out. I'm sad to say, but I don't know of any other quick solutions for doing this. You basically just have to pull, you have to cut your thread and then rethread. So that's what I had to do, is I had to cut my thread and then rethread it. Both sides, unfortunately. Sometimes you can do just one and you're good. Sometimes you can't. So I'm literally having to rethread. Push through there, push through there, push through there, and then slowly push it on through. So that's been rethread. I have to rethread the other one too, because I had to cut through it to show you what to do when you make that mistake. Because I guarantee you, if you do stitching, you're going to make that mistake at some point. Particularly when you're stitching inside of something, like a bag, and you can't see very well, and you're doing thread that's the same color. It is so easy to split the thread and then end up with something that you can't fix readily without cutting your thread. Okay, so now I have threaded my needles, and I'm ready to start back again. So that's why you don't want to split your thread if you can avoid it, because you have to fix it by cutting your thread. Okay, I'm back in the groove of things here. Yeah, sometimes you can't avoid, when you punch holes like this, these holes are fairly large. I found it's a lot more difficult to avoid splitting your thread on projects where you use the smaller hole punches. When you want the holes to be really, really fine. These holes are a little bit large. They really are. Zoom out a little bit more. As I said, these holes are a little bit large, so I got a little piece of thread that got lodged up in there. So now, in case you're wondering, why don't I just do 2 or 3 holes at once? I mean, wouldn't it be faster if I could just do 2 or 3 holes at once? Well, I have found when you do that, this looks okay, but it's not like perfect or anything. It looks okay. Hand stitching, it's okay. Here's what happens when you try to do multiple holes at once. Like I'm going to do this through one hole, through another one, and then through another one. Okay? Then I'm going to take my other needle. I'm going to pop through this one. Really hard to do without splitting the thread. I guarantee you, when you're doing multiple holes like this, you almost always split your thread. Poke through that one. Poke through this one. So I went through 3 holes at once. It's a lot harder to get this tight when you pull on it. Really hard to get the threading tight. You almost have to pull like that, and then it bunches up. You end up with a sort of bunched up, puffed up thread look. That's why I don't do multiple holes at once. It's really hard to, particularly on the harder leather. The softer leather is a little more forgiving. So, hole, hole, tighten. Hole, hole, tighten. Now sometimes you misgauge the amount of thread that you have or need, and you end up running out of thread. So I'm going to assume that I did that. Okay? One of my threads I just didn't do it right. I miscalculated, and there's only a little bit of thread left. In fact, I'm going to cut this and show you what you end up with. Like let's say I only have, you know, this much thread to work with and I have all these holes left to do. So I'll smooth it through like so, always to the back side. Make sure that you're going to do this on the back side. Okay. And I only have a little bit of thread left. I'm going to cut it so I can show you. So what do when you only have a little bit of thread left? Well, what I do is I actually tie a knot in it. Very simple. And I tie it as close to the hole as I can get it. And I make sure it's a square knot. The ideal is to not have to do this, to be honest with you. So I'm going to put it as close to the hole as I can get it. And I'm going to make a square knot right there. Okay? Now I'm going to leave this the way it is right here to start. I don't want to cut these threads yet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue stitching as if the hole doesn't exist. I mean, as if the knot doesn't exist. Like so. And I'm just going to keep stitching. Okay. I'll wait and worry about the danglers later. So here I am, I'm stitching through after I've repaired the lack of thread by tying a knot into it. It looks a little unseemly, to be honest with you, but you know, sometimes you can't help it. You screw up and you just don't give yourself enough thread. This happens more often when you're doing large projects and you're stitching, you know, a good yard worth of holes, which would be about a meter. You've got a meter or a yard worth of fabric that you're stitching together, and trying to gauge how much thread you need for all that, it gets challenging. And you run out of thread all the time when you do larger projects like that. So I'm literally just continuing my stitching with that knot right there. There we go, still stitching. Time consuming. Stitching is one of the most time consuming activities for leather. Extremely time consuming. Now if you're not careful, this happens all the time, particularly with soft leather. Your leather bunches up and your threading doesn't always look uniform. It's just something that happens with soft leather because it's so flexible that even the way that the threading comes down on the hole can actually affect the look. And I usually just try to move the threading back into place and just pull on it like so. At the last hole here, pull that through, pull this through. Now, my last hole I never leave at the end. I always run through, I always feed back in to the line, like so. I always go back at least 2 holes to add a little more strength to it. So there you go. I've gone 2 holes back. This one here, 1. I just do 1 hole in the one and then 2 on the other, and that way both threads are at the back on the rough side. Pull them nice and tight, like so. Okay? And then, let me zoom in here. I'm going to show you what you do with the end here. Okay. Now you've got your ends to your leather right there. I'm going to actually cut it like so. So you got little danglers hanging there. And since I've cut that, I'm going to cut these 2 here as well. Right here. Right here. This is where the knot was. I'm going to cut right where the knot was. on both sides. The other side here. So what I've got now is I've got my knot there that I fixed, and I got two danglers there. This is where a lighter comes in. The wax thread has to be burned. So I'm going to literally take the lighter, as you can see here, and I'm going to burn it. Okay, I'm going to smooth it in like this. I'm going to burn this one. That'll solidify that knot and smooth it in. And then I'm going to burn along the edge to really solidify this threading. I always burn on the inside first, or I try to always do that, all along the edge. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. So I'm literally going to burn all along the inside of this and then smooth it like so, and then I'll burn the front. I'll try to fix some of these little ones here that are a little bit off just with my fingernail. I have a little bit longer fingernails than I should, I guess. But, okay, and then I'm going to burn the outer edge here just like so. That burns the wax on the threading, and it darkens it a little bit, but it also makes it stronger. So that's the decorative edge for the flap. So when I put the flap into place here, like so, see that? That will be on the flap side right there. It's not necessary, it's just for decoration, but it does make it look a little more finished.